The Azcende Dialogue. Thank you for your time this morning from sunny Canberra. As we said, the Azcende Dialogue is all about national security, emerging technology, and all things in between, geopolitics, etc. And we're here this morning to talk about your startup, Seitec. So I'm not going to say too much about it, other than you are the CEO and founder of Seitec. Pretty interesting background in terms of how that came to be. So I'm looking forward to hearing the story this morning. So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about Seitec, a little bit about yourself, how it started, and how you got to where you are now.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks, Lani. Is that how you pronounce it, Lani?
Yes, Lani.
Yes,
yeah.
Awesome, got it. Yeah, look, thanks for having me today. Yeah, this will be my first interview. So let's see how this goes.
First of many. First of many.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, how did this start? So I guess if we go right back to the start, I spent almost 20 years in defence. The first half of my career, I was a technician on F-111 and Super Hornet aircraft. Did a bit of instructing, and that really set a foundation of technical skills. I guess coalface skills, understanding what it's like to be on the coalface, doing the work from the worker's perspective. From there, I went to ADFA as an advanced student, so the Australian Defence Force Academy. And as an advanced student, it's a good place to be because you go to uni full time and you don't have to go and do all the military skills. You do help out as a like in a sort of a leadership position with the direct entries and all those sort of undergrads, and that's a good experience as well. But for the most part, you just go to uni and you go home. So I studied my butt off for 4 years.
Yeah.
Developed a real love for electronics engineering. Ended up doing some work experience in my third year with a leading edge hardware company in Canberra here called Liquid Instruments, and working for a bunch of PhD ex NASA, JPL, gravitational wave labs people. Learnt a heap, and got treated as an equal, which was great. And then I ended up finishing my degree. I published a paper, presented that at the Sydney University on satellite comms, achieved everything I wanted to achieve. Then went out to a program office within Air Force where we do the sustainment and acquisition. But look, to be honest, that's where things slowed right down. So you go back into the sort of the cogs are turning pretty slowly. Typical defence acquisition, and I was very bored. So I finished university, achieved all I wanted, and then went out to the program office, and things slowed right down. I went from this extremely high-paced, high-intensity degree, and it was not easy. ADFA is a very sort of design-centric university, and once I got to the SPO, I was like, oh, okay, well, what do I do now? And at the time, I was doing my full-time job in probably a couple of hours a day. And so at the time, I was the in-service coordinator across weapons ranges. So we were doing the acquisition and sustainment of small projects and small systems across our weapons ranges where we go and drop bombs. And I came across some pretty big issues where we were dropping bombs and they were failing to explode, and then they were going missing. So you can imagine if you go and drop a bomb and it's got a guidance system on board and it fails, those bombs can go a long way off target. And generally speaking, there's safety systems in there that if you do have these failures, they won't explode.
Yes.
So now you have this, a literal ticking time bomb sitting out there, just waiting to be found. And we tried a bunch of different things to see if we could satisfy this problem. There was a need. There was a statement of need, and they needed a UXO detection system. I got the go-ahead from the CO at the time, and he said, look, you've got time. If you can come up with some experiments or whatever, then do it. So I went and ran some experimental tests up at Bradshaw Field Training Area up in Northern Territory. We flew UAVs. We did photogrammetry, where they use AI to look at all the different changes.
Yeah.
And what I asked them to do was detect 60-centimeter holes, which are like entry points where bombs go into the ground. And they were successful, but the problem is that it's all after the fact. You can't, you're not doing it live. So, and then the cost was prohibitive. So we used a very, very good operator, low cost operator, but they're very small. They wouldn't be able to, provide that sustainment across all ranges. At scale. Yeah. So then you're starting to look at some of the big players like in situ, that kind of stuff. And they're very expensive. So we couldn't do that. So then I started looking at fiber optic systems, seismic, cameras, acoustic systems, and I looked across the market at all these different things. Couldn't find anything. And then I just said to the boss, look, if you don't mind, I'm just going to work in some of my downtime, and at home, I'm trying to come up with something. And that's what I did. Fast forward, I had to pitch to Jericho, which was the innovation branch at the time. They gave me 200 grand and posted me to Canberra full time. And I started working with the Australian National University and Geosciences Australia and started pulling this seismic system together. The ANU helped me run a test out at Delamere where we went and dropped bombs all over these seismic sensors. They came back and said, yeah, this is feasible. They found a bunch of really key information, really key seismic and acoustic information. I was like, wow, these things are very, very unique. So keep going, and we hit August of 2020, and we go and run a test at Orchard Hills where we go and bury explosives under the ground to emulate bomb impacts, and the system worked. And it worked straight off the bat. We didn't have to calibrate or anything. It just worked. As an engineer, I was sitting there going, oh, but this is not good enough. This is like Bunnings irrigation boxes, and this is, hand soldered cards and stuff. I look at it, I'm like, yeah, it's functional, but it was terrible. And I had stakeholders saying, when can we get it? We need it now. And I said, you can't, like, it's not ready. So at that point, the director of Jericho at the time, he said to me, okay, what are we doing now? How are we going to get this out there? I looked at pushing it out to industry. We tried that. It didn't work. And then we got some advice from a chief, RAF, maybe chief negotiator for Defence or Air Force at the time. And he came back and he said, why don't they just spin you out? I said, well, Air Force, we don't do that. We don't know how to do it. And he goes, yep. This person I was talking to said, look, so what? Figure it out. You figured out all this other stuff. Figure this one out. It's no different. It's just another problem. Just solve it. And that was pretty much the end of the conversation. I had a chat with the director. The director said, right, if you want to do it, you got my full support. So at that time we had to ensure that there was no conflict of interest or probity. So I had to cut all ties with the stakeholders, which was hard. So I would be ignoring phone calls and ignoring emails or sending back saying I can't, it was horrible. And then eventually September 2021, I got out of defence, negotiated an IP license, an exclusive IP license with DSTG. And that was really the start of the company.
No, I mean, I can't imagine that this is a common thing, like a spin out from one of the branches of the ADF.
No.
I mean, not that I've heard of.
So DSTG have done it. So, a really good example is James Palmer out of Silentium.
Okay,
So I'm just trying to think of, if he reads this, I apologize that I forgot the name of your co-founder. But him and one of the guys that was working for him were working on passive radar. They got out of, I think it was about 2015, 2014, I think they got out of DSTG and started up Silentium. And that's, it's a great success story. They're going bonkers. And so DSTG have done it. They have, 70 or 80 IP licenses out there in industry. So they helped. But Air Force, it's not a thing that we do. So we had to figure that all out. And I think we did it well. It was not an easy pathway by any stretch of the imagination. But my thoughts, when the director said, do you want to do this? My thoughts were, you get one chance at this life. You may as well have a good crack at it. And this is an opportunity that's probably never going to come around again. So I would rather try and fail
Yes.
than, never give it a crack in the first place, and stay in that safe place. So I went out and raised a bit of cash from friends, family, and fools in December of 2021, which was enough to stop chewing through our savings, so I could start paying myself a salary, and then raised a bit more cash with angel investors from Brisbane, Melbourne, and Sydney. That allowed me to hire my first employee. He's almost a fairly a founding member, I guess. Bevan Fairley, he's my CTO, and he's been brilliant. He's got a master's in AI, professional AI. He's amazing with software. He can run software teams, in his sleep. Plus, he has some really good experience. Really good applied experience.
Okay. So that's fascinating background story, and I guess tell us where Seitec is now, right? So you came out of Air Force detection, etc., for unexploded bomb ordnance. Now, you from speaking to you earlier this year, there is a dual purpose aspect to the technology. So tell us what it looks like now in the markets that you're sort of going into.
Yeah, sure. So UXO tracks, it's very, very specific to weapons ranges, except that the hardware itself is dual purpose. So we have UXO tracks and Nightingale. Now, Nightingale is model. The name comes from the old the feudal days, like Japanese feudal days. The Nightingale floors, where you'd have these people walking through and they would squeak, and that was like the first type of footstep detection. So that's where the name comes from. And effectively our units do footstep detection. So we've gone and tested that. We can see footsteps out to 30 to 40 meters radially from the sensor.
From one sensor.
From one sensor.
Okay.
They can be deployed extremely rapidly. So you're talking single digit minutes or a minute, completely concealed. So there are intelligence applications there, but you can also go and hook up a solar panel to it, and that system will run indefinitely in a where concealment's not an issue. So I guess the markets that we're looking at, the physical security markets, which are currently dominated by things like cameras and radars. But the biggest weakness across those technologies in these markets is that any kind of obstruction, be it landscape, vegetation, vehicles, buildings, that's where they stop dead. The other thing about cameras and radar is you can see them, and if you can see the system that is trying to detect you, it makes it much easier to figure out how to get around it. But when you can't see the system, and the system is not obstructed by things on the surface of the earth, and it can effectively see through walls, then you have a pretty formidable system. The Nightingale is not the silver bullet. It's not designed to go and replace. It's not designed to go and replace cameras. It's designed to supplement them and create something which is almost impenetrable, because now what you have is a system that can detect people, vehicles, perhaps UAVs, even through to aircraft, through anything. So through if you're walking on the other side of a 10-foot thick concrete wall, the system's going to detect you. It doesn't care. But it can cue other systems on. So even if Nightingale says, hey, there's someone over here behind this building, a camera might swing on, cue on, and start following wherever Nightingale is saying that person is.
Which they do already in terms of camera tracking, etc. It's done already.
Exactly. So cameras can track, but they obviously can't track what they can't see. So that's where Nightingale comes in, and it gives them the ability to see through walls.
Right. Is the sensor technology sensitive enough to distinguish between animal, human, male, female, or is that too far down the track?
Well, I'm not going to say so. There's nothing in this area is impossible. What I'll tell you, I'll tell you what we've achieved so far. So with basic recognition, basic gate recognition, which is I would say very low hanging fruit and very easy to do, the system can tell the difference between myself and my CTO.
Okay.
And there's that, but that is
Mm-hmm.
an easy task to achieve. We did a test here at my house where we had the sensor buried in the garden loosely at one corner of the house, and I was on the opposite side of the house in the backyard. So I was
Mm-hmm.
32 meters away or so. The
Yeah.
very first step, the AI picked up my footstep.
Mm-hmm.
Out of 147 steps made throughout the house over carpet, rugs, outside on the grass, it picked up every footstep. It successfully classified 136 of the steps, but it also rejected my little dash hound, and it rejected
Wow.
doors opening and closing.
Yes.
And that was simply because Bevan, so the CTO, Bevan, went through and he tested a heap of different AI models, an innumerable number of AI models.
Yep.
And then he landed on one that's like, oh, this one's actually really good because it's not, the balancing act is, do you overtrain the system to make sure that it can pick up exactly what you're looking for? But if anything falls out, if there's a little bit of variance, it's not going to make a detection.
Yeah.
Or do you train it so loosely that a dog, a door, and so what he found was quite a happy medium where it'll generally pick up a human footstep, which is very specific, but it does reject things like doors and dogs, and we'll keep on improving that system. It's not our absolute focus right now because we're under contract to develop UXO tracks.
Yes.
But we are expanding the team, and with this new hire that we're taking on right now, we are dedicating X amount of time per week to Nightingale development because there is, we have seen a need from potential customers saying, when is this thing going to be in production? When can we test it? When can we get our hands on it?
No, I mean, look, and I think back, to the current war in Israel and Hamas at the moment in the Middle East, right? How they breached the border. Reading, I mean, I've got no first-hand knowledge. I've just read all the reports in that of how how Hamas breached the border, and which they took out a lot of the sensors, as you discussed, right? A lot of the cameras, etc. They had drones dropping, munitions on them, etc. So something like Nightingale would have come in very handy in terms of thinking deployed across a wide border. And if it's got access to solar, it sounds like it's a really intriguing sort of system.
Absolutely. I still get excited about it every day.
So in terms of its use case, though, are there other more sort of civilian type use cases? I suppose if you look at things like prisons or high security area like data centers, even that it probably is a good use case there.
Yeah. So I have talked to the director of security here at the Alexander McConaughey Centre prison in Canberra.
Yes.
And he described to me all the systems they used. So millimeter radar, the Gallagher, fence detection systems, thermal and optic cameras, you name it. The thing is none of them have really been specifically designed for prisons, and they get so many false positives that security guards effectively just they start to ignore these systems. So the words that I got from that director of security at the time was, if you can delineate between a kangaroo and a human, and you can pick up footsteps around specific areas we need to monitor, he said you've solved the system. It's and the fact that you can install it away from where a prisoner could get their hands on it, so you could put it behind concrete walls, and it doesn't matter if the wall's in the way. You can put it in concrete pits. You can do whatever you need to do to get it away from the meddling hands of a prisoner.
Yes.
So prisons definitely. You've got critical infrastructure protection, which is becoming more and more of a focus. When you have a look at Australia right now, and when you look at the DSR and northern bases, northern base protection, just having fence line detection around, a relatively low cost fence line detection that could queue up more expensive, systems to look at, who is coming into the space at the moment. Right through to potentially unobtrusive, passive elderly fall detection.
Yes.
So right now, people will wear lanyards around their neck, but they'll go and have a shower. This is probably a really critical point. They'll take it off. If they fall in the shower, no one knows. So if you can have a couple of sensors that may be installed outside of the house, but over time you learn pattern of life information. And the idea, I feel, is that you would get to a point where if something was odd, if there wasn't movement in a period of time, you could send that to the sons or the daughters. And if there's no response, then you could send out a thing to the police or to wherever it is, emergency services. So I look at that and I go, that's really cool. There's security along Tasmanian poppy fields. There's the possibility of using it to do like detection of pigs in agricultural settings, where overnight they can come in and destroy entire crops.
Yes.
You could have them.
So it is a really wide range using use cases.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it comes down to what software you load onto it. So if we go out there and we train the system to detect human footsteps, great. We train it to detect and track vehicles, awesome. But then there's nothing stopping us from collecting data on pigs walking around or cattle, or going and studying falls and all that kind of stuff. Like this stuff isn't hard to access. The hard thing to access is our hardware, because there's not a whole lot of these kinds of systems out there on the market. Especially which have had the development that this system has had, right, through Air Force and now in the private sector. And we what we're doing is not easy. And we have hired an absolute gun team of specialists, because I need to put my absolute trust in everyone that works in the company. And if you have a look at a Venn diagram, there's not a whole lot of crossover between people's skill sets.
Wow. Okay.
So what we're doing is not easy. There's not a whole lot of, almost everything we do is bespoke. But once that's done, once we've solidified the hardware, it's pretty much the same hardware across UXO Trax and Nightingale. And then in time, what do we become? We become a software and a data company with a hardware system that we can sell. So if you think about Apple, everyone loves the phone, right? But they don't do many modifications to the phone year to year. But it's the software, it's the user experience, it's everything else that goes with it. It's a great model.
It's the ecosystem that they tie you into. But you're right, and that was actually going to be one of my questions. Was hardware is great. I mean, in terms of, but hardware can be copied, it can be commoditized, etc. And it sounds like you guys have a plan, or already a plan in motion around the software, around AI integration to improve what you're doing, etc. In terms of the just quick, I don't know how much you know about it in terms of the AI model that you're using. But is it a small footprint time model that gets put directly into the sensor, or are you collecting it at a central point and sort of running the analysis there?
Yeah, so I know a fair bit about the AI. I won't go into the details of how it does it, but the design philosophy of all of our systems from day one was these things need to be deployable, they need to be smart, they need to be quiet. So when you have to think about special forces, those kind of things, you don't want to have a system that is beaconing out information or has a requirement for a high data throughput backhaul to a server where you have a huge AI model that's now processing all this information. So what we do is we collect a bunch of information, we train models, and once those models are trained, then we deploy them out to the edge. So our edge devices are using filters and models that are trained in-house. But we also, we have, I guess, our formidable AI team, or digital signal processing team. We have a PhD physicist and mathematician. Maths is his everything. He's it's like watching a beautiful mind in real life. So there's him and there's Bevan, and they work side by side with this model generation. And so you have the mathematician that really sees the world as it's a mathematical function. And at the core of every AI model, it's just maths. Right? There's a point where a human says, "Oh, that's AI," but really to him, it's like, well, it's all maths from start to finish. It's just that AI models are just very, very complex. That's it. So they work really well together, and effectively he builds something and goes, right, I can do this with a DSP model, like a digital signal processing model. And Bevan says, right, I'm going to now sit an AI model next to that. So, but then we use DSP and AI across a broad spectrum. So we have stuff going on in the node itself that is both AI based and straight DSP maths. And then up in the server where we take just very low drag inferences. So a sensor might just go, I've detected this thing at this time over here. And it just sends that little squirt of information. Very, very low drag. The server takes that information and then the server can then process that and say, okay, cool. I've now employed some other AI here to tell the user what all these inferences mean.
Got it.
Where something is. And that also sits alongside some extremely complex mathematical algorithms. So we have a very, very healthy mixture of AI and DSP to the point of where I think it'd be hard to figure out exactly where that difference is, because both Bevan and James, the physicist, will argue that AI is just simply maths. There's nothing more to it. But I think probably the really good thing for us is AI is a really big buzzword at the moment. There's a lot of companies out there that when they put in tenders, they will put AI even if they're not using it. But I can put my hand on my heart and say, we are using AI across the entire spectrum of our system. And
look, and what I love about what you described is that the complexity of it, which generally complexity is not great, but the complexity that you're using it in actually adds to the whole defensibility in terms of it's not going to be easy to copy even if someone wanted to do it right. It's that when we talk startups, it's the defensive moat that you have around your technology that will, given that you're an early sort of mover, anyone who wants to copy it, you've at least got a number of years in terms of gap. So I mean that's good, and it's a good story to tell. You're right. In every sort of conversation I'm having with startups, the question you've got to ask them as well is, well, tell us your usage of AI or how you're doing it. And primarily, most people are just using it from a generative AI perspective, where you guys are doing it very differently in terms of predictive analysis, almost, deep neural networking, etc. So good on you. And I'll pivot slightly to the market, right? So it sounds like you're operating in the Australian market at the moment. Are there any plans for, most startups are like, we're heading to the US or we're going to the EU because that's where the money is. What are your plans for expansion?
So, like you just said, hit the nail on the head. Right now, it's focused on Australia. But we have had interest from Singapore about both systems. But when it comes to the EU or Europe in general and the US, we absolutely want to push in there, and we are engaging on some fronts. So there's the Defence Security Accelerator in the UK. They currently have an EOI out for something that is right in our ballpark. So, I think that's for projects up to £500,000. And Nightingale fits beautifully into that. So we're currently looking at that. CTO and I had a chat about that yesterday. So we'll probably be applying in that area. We also know that Kinetic own and run all of the weapons ranges across across the UK, and they have like a sort of, I guess you could say, the exclusive run. So the Defence Force over there just says, right, you guys own the ranges. We just want the capability. You manage it. So anyone who comes in goes through Kinetic. I've talked to Kinetic here, asked about how that all works, and they are interested in what we have. So that, there's a potential way of going in there through Kinetic onto the ranges for UXO tracks. There's the Defence Security Accelerator, Defence Security, DSA? Defence Security Accelerator in the UK for Nightingale. Within the US, we have reached out to SOCOM, so we met some SOCOM guys at IndoPac. They've asked us to push something through their ESOF platform, ESOF. They also have Tech Tuesdays where you can go and propose technology to special forces there. The thing that I've come to understand about ESOF is that when you put in your application there, that opens up your application, I guess, to the entire US government. So it doesn't open it up to industry, but it opens up to the entire US government. So FBI can look at it.
Homeland Security.
So And then also there's the Defence Innovation Unit. So we recently went down and met up with the Defence Innovation Unit down in Melbourne, had a chat to them, and we do fit into a few of their portfolios. So I guess they're the avenues that we're looking at. We definitely want to expand into the US, and we definitely want to expand into Europe. I guess what we've found is that, especially on the UXO Tracks front, the problem is much, much bigger than I ever imagined. I always saw UXO Tracks as being the launch pad for the company to just get a bit of revenue in Australia and to support that need. I didn't really know how big the problem was outside, but now I'm hearing about issues, in Sweden, and issues in the US, and issues in the Middle East, and issues in Singapore, issues in the UK, where they are losing artillery rounds. And because everyone's using these advanced, like artillery and airdrop weapons and whatever else, because we're using, these highly technological guided weapons, when they go wrong, they go really wrong.
Yeah, got it.
Because the weapons danger area on these things is huge. You go and drop a bomb from 20,000 feet and the guidance system fails, 10 seconds after it gets released off the aircraft, you might have 2 minutes of flight of an unguided weapon.
Wow. Yeah.
So where on earth is it going to go?
Yes. And there's a wide area where it can go.
Yep. So the problem is getting bigger. We've got the guided weapons explosive ordnance enterprise being stood up here in Australia. So we'll be doing weapons testing. You've got hypersonics going on. You've got all these things that are going on. Yeah. And it's not just us doing this. It's the US doing it. It's the EU doing it. It's the UK doing it. It's the Middle East doing it. It's everywhere. And so I think we are on the precipice of something really, really big, where we're able to offer something in the market that doesn't currently exist. We're not here to replace something. UXO Tracks, there's nothing like it.
Yeah.
Nightingale, there's a couple of other competitors in the market, but that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. We'll find the edge, and we'll produce something that
like that.
that works really well in that market. So that's our plans. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. Well, look, last question, and it's around the innovation question. I mean, you're an Australian tech startup, right, in the national security space. How would you compare yourselves to, or have you seen competitors, et cetera, in Israel, in Silicon Valley, et cetera? How would you compare, I guess, Australian innovation to overseas innovation?
Yeah, and look, it's a difficult question, because I think Australians by nature are highly innovative.
Yes.
When you have a look back at World War I, World War II, Vietnam, we never had the people to do the same job that the US could do, but we found a way to do it, and we're always regarded as highly innovative thinking people. I think our problem is that we don't necessarily have the money. Yeah. We don't necessarily have investors here that have the money that can bankroll these difficult jobs to do, these difficult bits of hardware, difficult bits of software, and especially in the defense space, it's difficult because it's expensive. The defense ecosystem is slow. The procurement cycle is slow. It's not about getting your monthly recurring revenue up. It's about getting one big contract or two big contracts,
which can take time, right?
Which can take a lot of time. Our first contract took us 22 months to negotiate.
Yeah, wow.
And we held in there till right at the end. We got it. So look, I think that there is issues with funding here. When you have a look at something like Anduril, right? Yes. Spun out of Silicon Valley, they had money. They were able to grow very, very quickly. They were able to absorb companies that had really, really good technology. Yeah. They've expanded out here to Australia, and they're doing well. But they had money, and that's the biggest thing. So I think we have the innovative capacity. We have very smart people. We have great ideas. But I don't necessarily think we have the same kind of support mechanisms and the appetite for risk here in Australia, both in defense and investment.
What you're describing is the ecosystem is not as mature, right? And you are right. Like, we're, from an investor's perspective, there's actually a lot of money in Australia in terms of, but it's in traditional infrastructure. It's in private equity, etc. The risk, the appetite, to take risks in terms of the venture space, the emerging tech space, is not here yet, and we hope it will. but it's it lags in that space, and I concur with you 100%, right? In terms of the number of startups that I've spoken to who are simply just doing more with less than compared to the to Israel or compared to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
You're literally building something with 2 or 3 people, whereas in the US you'd have teams of like 10 or 15, doing it. So it does make us innovative, but we just need that support mechanism behind them.
Yeah, and look, Israel's a great example of how to do it. They spend a lot of money in R&D.
Mm-hmm.
They have government-driven incentives and government-driven programs to develop new technology. We have it here; it's just not to the same scale. It's slowly getting there, but at the same time, I'd say that there are things that have gone backwards in some areas. And the US is also prepared to throw a lot of money at innovation, because at the end of the day, if a conflict arises, you don't want to be caught in a situation where you have spent so long not taking any risks that you don't have the edge anymore. To have the edge costs money and it takes risk. If you want to be the person in the air that has the best jet or the best weapons system, or you want to have the troops that have, the detection systems that give them the edge over the competitor, it doesn't come from going slow and being, really conservative and, making sure that all the process is done correctly. You need to go, right, we need to take risks, cut the process, throw some money at it. Something's going to fail. That's fine. Right. But every now and then we're going to land on a real nugget, a gold nugget, a bit of tech that is amazing. And it is going to give us the edge in maybe this one small scenario, but that could be a tipping point. It's I think we've still got a lot to learn, and perhaps it's because Australia is not in conflict. That's war drives innovation. So we feel safe, but the way the global sort of tensions are right now, maybe it's not going to be like that forever. And you don't want to be reactive in this space. You need to be proactive.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, well, that's great. Look, that's all the questions that I had. Fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. That's a really great story in terms of how Seitec and how you came to be, but excited for your future in terms of where you could go, right? Especially when you're talking about international expansion.
Yeah, absolutely. This whole thing excites me every day. Like, I think about the tech and I think about the team, and I feel so lucky. So lucky to be here, and I can't see that feeling dying anytime soon. I believe in the tech. I believe in the team. I know the needs there. It's an awesome feeling every day. It really is.
Awesome. Well, we'll be keeping close tabs on Seitec and what you guys are doing in the future.
Cool. Thank you very much, Lonnie.
Thank you.
All right. Catch you later, mate.